Today we're making 5 veggie packed meals and we're getting all our ingredients from the Dollar Tree. First, I got this California blend, which has broccoli, cauliflower, and carrots in it, a package of mixed vegetables, 1 package of the cheesy cheddar Knorr pasta sides, I got the Rotini, a package of Bisquick, a can of the chicken a la king, and 1 can of chicken. We are going to do a special trick with these vegetables to try to make those peas not be hard like bullets, as I know Dollar Tree peas seem to be notorious for. I started off prepping most of our ingredients. First, I did up this pasta mix with a 1.5 cups of boiling water and then added the pasta and stirred it. Once it was al dente, I took it off of the heater and went ahead and drained my can of chicken, opened my can of chicken a la king. Next, I preheated my oven to 450 degrees and followed the directions on the back of the Bisquick mix to make the biscuits, which just called for a 1/2 cup of water. Then you mix it all together and you come up with a really nice dough that works for all kinds of different uses. I used it for several different instances in all these recipes. First, I took 2 pucks of the dough and made 2 little biscuits. Those will be for 2 of our different meals. Next, I took another biscuit-sized piece of dough and rolled it out very thinly, poked holes in it with a fork, and then sliced it. You could use a pizza cutter instead, but I just used a knife and cut it into very small pieces. My goal for this was to make something similar to oyster crackers. I added a little bit of salt on the top, but you can skip that part if you don't want that. I baked it for 10 minutes in 450 degrees, took it out and just kind of turned everything over so that everything was broken up and ready to crisp up, and then I went ahead and baked it for 5 more minutes. I then opened and poured out our California blend to see what we're working with. We had a pretty good blend of the vegetables, an even blend I should say. I also poured out our mixed vegetables and set aside a little bit of that broccoli. It's 1/3 cup. This will get us started on our first meal, which I took a cup measurer and measured out a cup of that cooked rotini. I put it in a small pan. I just used a 6-inch cake pan and put it in the bottom of that. Added the 1/3 cup of broccoli and also 1/3 cup of chopped up cauliflower. I did cut these into smaller pieces so that it was spread throughout the pasta a little bit better. I added 1/4 cup of water and a little bit of salt and pepper, then mixed it all together. I then took half of one of our biscuits and just kind of crumbled up half of the biscuit all over the top. I was hoping that this would mimic breadcrumbs a little bit. They were a little bit softer in the end than breadcrumbs would be, but they still had that nice little crisp element and a little extra flavor to the dish, and it looked pretty nice in the end. I baked this in my 450 degree oven for 15 minutes, took it out of the oven, and here we have our completed meal. This was really delicious, nice and cheesy, very simple, and just a delicious, easy meal. Now we're making this green bean rotini using 1/3 cup of green beans, which we pulled out of that mixed vegetable blend. I added a dash of this chicken bouillon, but you can leave that out if you prefer. I added 1/4 cup of water, and I also set aside 1/3 cup of the rotini noodles for later. I forgot to add that. I took 2 tablespoons of our chicken a la king and added this in. This is just going to add that extra richness and creaminess. I added a tablespoon of the chicken from our can of chicken. Mix this all together over medium heat until that pasta was super tender and the green beans had cooked slightly. I like them still a little al dente, so I left them that way. I took half of that second biscuit and just added it on the side for this meal just to make a complete meal. This one was extra cheesy and delicious as well. Now we're going to be making a personal pan pot pie. I used 2 cups of our mixed vegetables, which was all of the mixed vegetables from that bag, and the remaining ones I should say, besides the green beans we had pulled out earlier. I wanted to show how hard the peas are. Of course, these are only slightly thawed, so they will still be fairly hard, but I wanted to show the difference between how soft they got after doing our little trick that we did. So I added in a cup of the chicken a la king, which was the remaining amount in that can, and I also added a cup of water. I did add more water as I went along and saw if the water was getting low. I also added the remaining of our chopped cauliflower, which is about 1/4 a cup, into this mixture. I set aside some carrots and green beans from the pot just because I knew I would be cooking this to death, and so I didn't want everything to turn out kind of brown. So I just set that aside. That's personal taste. You don't have to do that, but I just picked it out of the pan. I also put in 2 tablespoons of chicken from that can of canned chicken. Then I took another biscuit's worth of our Bisquick dough and pressed it very thinly into the bottom of this pan and used a fork to make a little design on the edge. You're going to want to spray this pan. I baked it at 450 degrees in the oven for about 15 minutes or until it started getting a little bit brown. Then you see I added another cup of water into our pot. And I also set aside 1 cup of that mixture after I had stirred in that water into a separate pot for another meal later on. You can see our peas have gotten really nice and tender. I cooked this for about 40 minutes, so I cooked it for quite some time. Then added in that 1/2 cup of green beans that I had kind of set aside to add on a little bit more color. I scooped out a good portion of this mixture. I just kind of eyeballed it. It was probably about a cup worth of the mixture into my pan on top of my pot pie crust and spread it out evenly. Then I took the other half of the biscuit that I had reserved earlier and just kind of crumbled that on top. Now I wanted to explain what I had heard about the peas was that young peas, when they're picked, are really soft and tender and sweet, but sometimes Dollar Tree picks theirs or cans theirs or packages theirs later, and as the peas ripen, all that sweetness turns into a starch, which is kind of hard, and it makes those peas extra hard and not quite as sweet as young baby peas. So I was told if you cook it a longer amount of time, treating it more like a bean or a split pea, that you're going to have a much better texture, and that seems to be true. Now to make some chicken and dumplings and to take all the tips that I had on how to make them earlier and put them to good use. I took that 1 cup of mixed veggies we had set aside earlier and a 2/3 cup of water along with 1/4 teaspoon of chicken bouillon and let that come to a boil. Then I added in pinches of dough into the mixture and put that lid on and did not touch it. It was about 1 biscuit's worth again, and that was the remaining of our biscuit dough. I somehow lost the footage of me actually pinching it off into the pan. After they had cooked for about 10 minutes, I took the lid off and added in 1/4 cup of chicken as well, and then let it cook for another 5. Then I stirred everything together, and here's our completed meal. These dumplings turned out so much better and it held up so much better in the meal. Thank you to all those that told me to keep that lid on and don't over stir it. Now, after we've finished making that chicken pot pie, you may have noticed that we had some veggies left. So I decided to make a chicken noodle soup with that. To those veggies, which were about a cup left of those veggies, I added 1/3 a cup of the rotini that we had set aside at the very beginning, 1/2 a cup of carrots, 1/3 a cup of broccoli, which was the remaining of our broccoli, as well as 2 cups of water and 1/4 teaspoon of chicken bouillon and some pepper to taste. You can add more chicken bouillon if you feel like it needs a little more flavor or a little more salt. I stirred all this together, let everything simmer for about 10 minutes, and then took it off and put it into my bowl. On the side, we had our crackers. This was really delicious, very comforting and filling, and it used up the remaining of our ingredients. We didn't have any ingredients left, nothing goes to waste, and we have all of our meals completed, full of veggies. If you are looking to reset your budget and maybe your diet a little bit after all that food for Thanksgiving, I hope that this meal plan helped you out a little bit or gave you some inspiration. Thanks for joining me. I will see you all in the next one.